you a mother, father, or you are involved in caring for children? If yes, then listen to Ask the Pediatricians every Thursday by 10 a.m. for insightful discussion on popular child health topics such as dangerous child health practices, immunization, infant feeding, developmental milestones, and so much more. You also get to ask questions on these topics and listen to answers to real-life child health issues by a pediatrician. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation is devoted to health education and information of parents and caregivers of children in the community to support you in raising healthy children. Don't miss Ask the Pediatricians with Dr. Gani because it's informative, educative, and interactive. Ask the Pediatricians Hour, the program for caring parents.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a fresh episode of Ask the Pediatrician Hour. Ask the Pediatrician Hour is a program brought to you by Ask the Pediatricians Foundation, and our mission is to help educate and inform parents on what you need to know to raise healthy children so that we don't have children dying from preventable and treatable conditions. And so we usually take an important topic every week and we talk about them and our role as parents, how to recognize them, how to more importantly prevent them. And today I'll be talking about another important topic, and that will be poliomyelitis, or popularly known as polio. So I want you to sit there and, if possible, get your friends, family to join us so that you can learn a lot about polio. And remember, you can watch this program on our Facebook page or the group. So if you're watching me on Facebook, welcome to you. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, you're also warmly welcome. If you're listening to me on Fresh Waves Radio, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are listening on Ask Dr. Bemi ATP podcast, you are also warmly welcome. And thank you so much for being part of today's broadcast. Remember, you can also listen and watch past episodes on any of these platforms that I've mentioned already. And if you have any questions following any of these topics that we've talked about, you're welcome to ask your question on our Ask the Pediatricians Facebook group from Mondays to Saturdays. And our professionals will be there to provide evidence-based answers to your questions. And of course, you can email us. You can email askthepediatricians@gmail.com, or you can send me an email at drbemisala@askthepediatricians.com as well. We will try and answer your questions as soon as possible. But the fastest way to get answers to your question is to go to our over 700,000 strong member Facebook group. Put your questions there, and within 24 to 48 hours, we'll do our best to answer your questions. So thank you so much for joining us. Before I go on to discuss today's topic, I just want to remind us of our project that is coming up. And that is our ATP Schools First Aid Care project. And our goal for this project is to empower our children, especially in secondary schools, with information and resources on basic first aid care knowledge. So we're going to go to the schools, we're going to give them a small card that we've designed, which will serve as reminder about what to do for most of the common medical emergencies. And we're also going to share with them our link to our online course on this same topic. And also we expect that our children will take this information home and the entire family will be empowered on what to do for basic first aid. And so if you want to support this project, nothing is too small. You can support us financially. You can donate to our accounts online, our Naira accounts, our dollar accounts, or you can go to our global giving page and you will see where you can donate. For those who are outside Nigeria, for example, they can accept donation using any cards, any platform on our Global Giving page. And we'll make sure we keep updating you as we begin to go to all these schools and sharing these materials and also the cause. And we hope that we're going to change the narrative, and most Nigerians will be knowledgeable. They will know what to do when there's an emergency, instead of just standing, taking photos, and watching the person die. So hopefully, we'll be able to change that through this project. And it's a long-term project. We hope to reach every secondary school within the next 5 years in Nigeria. So please, you are welcome to donate. You are welcome to support us in any way, and we'll do our best to acknowledge your support. Thank you so much. All right, so welcome again to today's podcast. For the last few weeks, I've been talking about what we call vaccine preventable diseases, because vaccines are so important in making sure our children do not, have to go through some of these illnesses. And some of these illnesses, before the era of vaccines, they were actually killer diseases. Many children would die, or many children would develop long-term disability as a result of some of this infection. So immunization has been a lifesaver for us. It's one of the most successful public health intervention. And now most children just hear, or most of them we just read about them because we don't experience them. Thank God for immunization. However, we are beginning to see a generation where people are now beginning to say, oh, why do you have to give your child immunization? And there are lots of wrong information, especially on social media, and there are so many people called anti-vaxxers, and because of that, we're beginning to see some of these illnesses cropping up again. And so as parents, it's important for us to understand these conditions and for us to know that the most important thing is preventing them. And that's why I've been doing this series on what we call vaccine preventable diseases. And I'm going to continue today by talking about poliomyelitis. In those days when there are no vaccination, a lot of children had developed what we call you know, disability, in which some of them, will not be able to walk because of what has happened to their legs as a result of polio. And so it's something that is very common. So polio is one of those vaccine preventable diseases that we are almost at the point of eradicating, and we're almost kicking polio completely out of the entire world. And currently, we have only about 4 countries that are still having issues with polio, but we're looking forward, and a lot of countries are polio free, and we are looking forward to getting polio completely out of countries like Nigeria, like Pakistan, India, where we still have some of these cases. So polio tends to affect children mostly, especially children under the age of 5 years. And unfortunately, one thing that polio often leaves is what we call paralysis. So polio leads to paralysis, and such children may have difficulty with their movements after having polio infection. But do you know that it's not only the paralysis, polio can also kill as well, because the same way the polio can paralyze their limbs, it can also paralyze what we call the muscles that make children to breathe. And so if those muscles are paralyzed, then those children won't be able to breathe, and those children will die. Indeed, 5 to 10% of cases of polio ends in death. So when we talk about, you see people making a lot of effort, and we do all these massive polio immunization campaigns, is because we don't want our children to die or suffer paralysis and lifelong disability as a result of poliomyelitis. So the cases of polio has been decreasing, and like I said, almost 99% gone. So we're almost there. We hopefully hope that very soon, just like smallpox is longer an infection anybody even talk about today, we hope that one day we'll start talking about polio as well, being one of those condition where we don't have to even worry about. So there's a lot of campaign by the World Health Organization, by the health communities to get rid of polio. And I mean, we're talking about worldwide eradication of polio, and that's what the WHO and everybody is working towards currently. So, what is polio? Polio is a viral infection caused by this poliovirus, and it tends to enter into the body system, and it tends to go for the nerves, and it can damage them, and it can now lead to paralysis. When we say paralysis, it means the person will not be able to move, those muscles will not be able to walk. And how do people get polio? Polio is transmitted through person to person, and especially through the oral fecal route. So most children who have polio will pass it through the feces, which can contaminate water, contaminate food, and other children get in contact with that, then they are also going to have polio. So that is the most common way by which children do get polio, and it's a very contagious, very easy to pick up, let me put it that way, very easy to pick up infection from one person to another person. And luckily, most people who have polio, they are going to have what we call asymptomatic infection. So these children will have this polio, but they will just have it like as if they're having malaria, they have a little bit of fever, or they may not even have any symptoms. So some may have a little bit of fever, malaria, like they're feeling not sick, or like flu, and then they're fine, and that is it. But a few percent, like 1% of them are the ones that's going to have this complication of polio. And so that is why we can't even afford, because that complication is so disastrous. So most people who have polio, no symptoms at all, so you won't even know that they have polio. However, about 25% of people will have what, like I said, flu-like symptoms. So they may have like sore throats, they may have a little bit of fever, they may be feeling tired, they may feel nausea, they may have some headaches, they may have some body pains, and that is all they're going to have. Within 2 to 5 days, all those symptoms will go away and the person will become okay by themselves. However, a very small proportion of people are the ones that are going to have this severe, complicated kind of polio. So polio is a virus that it's especially like the nerves, so it tends to go to the brain, and it can cause what we call meningitis. So the meningitis is not only with bacterial infections or other viruses. Poliovirus is one of those viruses that can also cause meningitis. And some people, it may also affect the spinal cord, and that's the one that tends to lead to paralysis, in which the person is not able to move their hands and their legs. And this is how we normally monitor polio in the community. So if a child is having fever and suddenly they cannot move their legs, we always want to suspect polio, and we call it acute flaccid paralysis. So a child is walking, a child is doing everything, and they have fever, and they have all those symptoms that look like malaria or look like flu, and the next thing, they cannot walk, or they cannot move their legs, or they even just feel weak. So in those cases, we need to think about possibility of polio. And this is why, again, we also don't want to allow children to be given intramuscular injections, because children who have such weakness, when they give them intramuscular injection, it tends to make the paralysis worse. And sometimes it creates confusion. So we're not sure whether this child is having polio or whether this child is having nerve injury from the injections and all that. So again, this is an opportunity for us to remind us to, as much as possible, avoid intramuscular injections on the buttocks, and even as much as possible avoid intramuscular injection generally in children, because that can easily convert the symptomatic polio to the paralytic kind of polio. And so this paralysis is the most serious complication in polio, because it's a permanent disability. So if a child develops paralysis, it's permanent with polio. And sometimes this paralysis is not just for the leg muscles only, which is the one that most of us tend to say. It can actually ascend, it can actually affect the respiratory muscles as well. And when it affects the respiratory muscles, the person can actually die from polio. So polio too can kill. That's why it's one of those killer diseases, and that is why it is one of those conditions that we do not want our children to have. So even children, sometimes it look like they've recovered from polio. Sometimes they may still develop what we call post-polio syndrome. So polio is not something that even ends with childhood. So it can start as a child, and then it may appear as if the person has recovered, but then the person can still have post-polio syndrome, where they eventually develop paralysis as a result of the polio that they have as a child. So polio is one terrible disease, and that's why we don't want our children to have polio. And it's very contagious. So it takes only one child to have polio in a community for most children in that community to be exposed to polio. And that is why this will be important to us when we start talking about prevention of polio, because most of us sometimes complain, like, why are they always giving these children the polio vaccine? My children have taken it several times. He has completed his own. Why do? It's because we need all the children to be protected at the same time, because one child with the abnormal polio, with what we call the white polio virus, can cause infection to all the children. However, the converse is also true. One child who is immunized, if many more children are immunized, they can kind of spread and infect other children, because the immunization is actually a form of polio that has been inactivated, and those children too will be protected. So that is why we want a huge number of children immunized at the same time, and that's why we do a lot of that polio campaign. All right. And so we talk about polio, the symptoms of polio. So polio, like we said, is a virus. It tends to come in through the mouth, and and that is how other people get it, through water and food. Actually, when we are not maintaining good hygiene, and children sometimes they just touch everything. Another child that's poo on the floor mixed with the soil, another child has gone to play with it. These are how children pick up these germs. And some of us, especially in Nigeria, some people even believe that it's okay for children to play with sand and that they need it as if it's part of development thing. But that's not even the issue. The issue is that those children are exposed to germs, and they're exposed to germs like polio, when the virus enter into the body. So it's spread through the poo of somebody who is infected. A little bit of it can also spread through the cough and the sneezes of the infected person as well. So this is how people get the polio. And sometimes people have the polio, but they don't have symptoms, and they keep spreading it. Okay, so all the children are exposed to the polio, but the person who is causing the infection does not even have any symptoms. So you can imagine that. So before the person, there's what we call incubation period. So the first 2 weeks after you get infected, where you will not have symptoms, but you are able to cause infection. And so these people keep passing the polio. You can imagine children under the age of 5, they're going to school, they're playing around, so they're playing with their others, friends, and they're spreading the polio virus, but they are not sick. So, and by the time we start seeing this virus, the infection, a lot of children are already infected. And so, and we've talked about the challenges, the symptoms, and the complications of polio, especially the paralysis and death, which is what we don't really want to happen. And so I think the most important thing for us as parents is to talk about how do we prevent polio, because is prevention. This is one of those conditions where prevention is much cheaper than cure. So you can imagine something that will it's lifelong. If a child develop paralysis, it's lifelong. If a child dies, it's like completely, it's a complete loss. So we really need to focus on how do we prevent polio. And of course, we have uh, two major means of preventing polio. We have the polio vaccines. Yeah, so we have polio vaccines, and we have two type of polio vaccines. We have the oral polio vaccine, popularly called OPV, and we have the inactivated or the injectable type of polio vaccine, what we call IPV. All right, so the question is, which one should we use? So for a long time now in Nigeria, we've been using the oral polio. The advantage of the oral polio is that it's very easy to give, and we can go around the whole of the community and give oral polio into the mouth. And like I said, vaccine, just to remind us again, itself is actually the polio virus we're giving the children. Okay, so when you are giving vaccine, you are actually giving the particular disease you're trying to prevent, but you're giving it in a different form. We have inactivated it, we have modified it. So when we give it to the children, we expect it to create a reaction response, what we call antibodies production, that will protect the children and not cause the disease. So normally when you are exposed to an infection, your body tries to fight it, but sometimes the infection may be stronger than your own body immune system, and that is when you now have the disease. But if you are able to overcome it, then you will not have a disease. So what we do with immunization is that we're giving the children a modified form of the infection, if you like, or whether the bacteria or the virus, or a product of the virus or the bacteria, and then stimulate the body will think they're actually having a real infection and produce a lot of response, a lot of antibodies to protect you. So, but because there's no infection actually, so those antibodies just stay in your body protecting you. And when you are now exposed to the real virus or bacteria or the infection itself, your body multiplies that response because it remembers, and because of that, the body is able to quickly eliminate that pathogen, that germ, and the children will not have the disease. That is what we try to do with polio and any other vaccines that we produce. So we have the oral polio vaccine, and we have the inactivated polio vaccine. Each of them has its own advantages. The inactivated polio vaccine, IPV, we give it as an injection, so it's given as an injection, whereas the oral polio vaccine is given through the mouth. These vaccines will protect the children. Oral polio vaccine, because it's a white polio virus itself that has been modified, a very little percentage of the children may actually have the polio itself instead of the response we want, but that is a very, very small, tiny percentage, unlike the inactivated polio vaccine, which, because it's an injection, is inactivated, it's not a live virus like the oral polio. The risk of a child developing a polio infection from the vaccine is very, very, very almost zero. All right, so usually in places where they see a lot of poliomyelitis transmission, we tend to use the oral polio. But when a country moves to the stage of being polio free, then they change to the IPV. So Nigeria now, we're in the middle. We're almost declared polio free. So we're changing from the oral polio to the IPV. So some of you will notice that now we're giving the children IPV. So we give them 3 doses of the oral polio and we're giving them IPV. The goal is that very soon we will stop the oral polio and we'll be giving our children only the injectable ones. So that which other countries who have eliminated polio is what they do. And so please, it's important that we take our children for the immunization. The oral polio vaccine is given at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, and 14 weeks. We also give it at birth. So there are about 4 doses that we give routinely to our children at birth. So that's one of the very first vaccine we give to children. We also give it at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, and 14 weeks. And now we're also giving the injectable. So with some people already giving 2 doses, IPV1 and IPV2. Some give us 14 weeks, and then some also do 10, 14. But we're gradually trying to take off the oral polio, and so just follow whatever is being done in your place, because we do it in phases in different places. There are different strategy, but we're hopefully everybody will stop taking oral polio and will be taking the injectable polio. But please and please make sure you take your children for the polio immunization. In addition to the what we call the routine immunization, which is the one we expect you to bring your children to us for us to give to them based on their date of birth, based on their age at 6 weeks, at 10 weeks, at 14 weeks. In addition to that, we also do what we call immunization campaigns. Immunization campaigns are what we call supplementary immunization. This is when we actually come out. You see all our health workers coming out to your communities, to our schools, to our churches, to mosque, to the market, to the nursery schools, and we immunize all the children again. And a lot of mothers always ask, can these vaccines be too much? Because my child has taken her home. I'm a very good, responsible parent, and I've taken my child for the routine immunization. But now the school is telling me that they are coming to give the immunization, or we're in church, they're giving it again, or somebody is knocking on our gates, they want to give again. Should I take? And I always tell them, feel free to take the immunization. Your children will never overdose on the oral polio. They don't overdose on it. Okay, the more they take, the more protected they. The reason why we give some of these vaccines multiple times, because your children need to take them multiple times to maintain the protection, because after a while the protection will begin to die down. And if we still have another child in that community who is not immunized, your children could be at risk as well. And which is why there are lots of what we call surveillance that we do. The Ministry of Health, the public health system, they monitor all this polio. If there's any case of acute flaccid paralysis, they will come, we will take the stool sample, we will send it to the virology lab, and then we will confirm whether the child has polio or not, because we really need to keep an eye, so that if there's still polio, if we notice that there's outbreak, a lot of children are having acute flaccid paralysis in that community, and then we have to go ahead and re-immunize people in the community. So please do not turn away our health workers will come to give you the supplementary immunization. Please always make sure that you take the immunization, and it's just 2 drops of the vaccine in your baby's mouth, and it causes them no harm. It's one of the easiest vaccines. It's not like the DPT Penta where your children is going to have fevers and all of that. Oral polio is one of those vaccines that is very straightforward and simple, and it does not cause any harm. It does not cause any. It doesn't cause much side effect. So please ensure that you take these vaccines for your children. All right, it's very, very important. We're having situation in some places where there's lots of local conflicts, especially in the northern parts of Nigeria, where we have a lot of Boko Haram causing a lot of mayhem. And because of that, a lot of families are being displaced. We have what we call the IDPs, internally displaced persons, and they are in camps. And some of them, because of that, the immunization for their children are not yet up to date. And this is why we're still not yet declared completely polio free, because of those places in Nigeria where children have not been fully immunized. So the government is working hard to make sure all those places, all those children that are displaced with their family are also immunized. Another problem we're having is a lot of misunderstanding or misinformation. I remember when I was serving in when we call National Youth Service in Sokoto, in that's over like 20 years ago. And I remember one of our staff there, who is actually a nurse, refused to immunize her children, and because she was being told that the West people, the Westerners, they are putting sterilization drugs or whatever inside the vaccines, so that when they give it to our children, those children will become infertile, and it's a way of controlling the world's population. I mean, there are lots of this kind of myths or lies that are being perpetrated, and people really believe them. And a lot of people didn't get their children immunized, and that's why we're still dealing with all these vaccine preventable diseases. So I'm here to just reassure you, if you are listening to me, maybe you've had that myth and you are also scared that maybe my child is going to be sterilized by taking immunization, or whatever you have had. I'm here to reassure you that that is not true. Okay, the oral polio vaccine, injectable polio vaccine, they do not sterilize you or your children, and your children will have their own children, so you don't have to be scared of that. Look at it from the consequence of not getting your children immunized. Paralysis, death, those are things we should not toy with. And so it is best safe and more cost effective, obviously, to take polio immunization than to allow our children to develop polio disease. So there's a lot of work going on. There's what we call polio eradication strategies. There are even the what's it called, the Rotary Club, and so many of them have pitched into this strategy, and everybody is working hard together to kick polio out of the world for good. And the WHO as well is doing a lot. And WHO said that about 20 million children today, 20 million people, not children, just 20 million people are walking today who would have been paralyzed. That's a huge figure. 20 million people have been saved just because they take polio vaccine. A lot of children who would have been paralyzed if there was no vaccine, they are walking today because we have this polio vaccine. And also 1.5 million children have been saved from death because of the polio vaccine. So, which is what the World Health Organization and everybody is doing. So, there's a lot of benefits from taking polio immunization. So my goal today is to encourage us to make sure that we take our children for this immunization, especially the polio vaccine. I will also answer a question. People sometimes ask about the OPV zero because some people deliver their baby, maybe there were issues and the baby was not given the OPV zero at birth, and then mothers worry about the implication of that. So I would just say, if that is your situation, you don't need to worry. We can still give the OPV zero up to 2 weeks. So if your child mixed it, you can always still go get it. If you didn't get it on day zero, which is the ideal thing, you can still get it up to 2 weeks. But if you don't get it up to 2 weeks, don't worry. We will give your children at 6 weeks. And like I said, because we do a lot of polio supplementary immunization campaigns, I'm so sure your child will get several doses before they turn 5. So a lot of children get, almost every year, we have what we call the National Immunization Days, where we do polio immunization campaigns, and we just go around because it's the easiest vaccine to give. We just go around all the houses, churches, mosques, health centers, schools, especially play groups and nurseries, and we just immunize all the children. So of course, we always take permission from parents, and so please give us the permission to immunize your children so that your children and all the children in your community will be protected against polio. All right. So thank you so much for those who are just joining me. I've been talking about poliomyelitis. Poliomyelitis is one of those vaccine preventable diseases. Polio is one of the childhood killer diseases, and more importantly, is one of the leading cause of disability. Because polio causes what we call paralysis, and that the paralysis can be a lifelong disability, and which will cost several millions of naira or dollars depending on your country to deal with even in future. So however, the good news is that polio is preventable. All right, polio is preventable. We can't actually treat polio. I noticed that if you didn't notice, you will notice I didn't talk about treatment because I usually talk about disease condition, how it is contracted, how it is transmitted, how it is spread. Then we talk about the symptoms, talk about complications. Then normally I will talk about treatment. Then before I will go on to talk about the prevention, but there's actually no treatment for polio. We don't have any drug that will treat polio. So most times we just pray and hope. We do what we call symptomatic management if a child has polio. So we give, if they're having fever, we give them paracetamol. Please avoid injections until you're sure your child does not have polio. Please avoid injection because intramuscular injection tends to convert what we call non-paralytic polio to the paralytic one. So actually, I want to plead with our private hospitals, doctors, because this is where this tends to happen a lot. And I understand that children sometimes don't want to take drugs by their mouth, and sometimes our mothers too. Some of us have this wrong belief system that injection works faster or injection is more effective. That is actually not true. Okay, injection doesn't work faster or is more effective. No, actually, injection has more risk, than giving the drugs by mouth. So I want to plead with us. If you are one of those parents who like to go to your doctors and say, I just want injection. I just want injection because you don't want to be bothered with trying to force the drugs down the mouth and all that. Please stop. Please stop. If there's any condition that should make you think or rethink that, it is polio, because like I said, 19% of children with polio, we have what we call asymptomatic infection, or even those who have symptoms, they will just have the normal flu, fever, malaria kind of features, and then they'll be fine, but if you go give them injection, you can actually convert them and speed up the conversion from what we call the non-paralytic kind of polio to the paralytic polio. So please, we, as much as possible, pediatricians, we don't like intramuscular injection in children. As much as possible, it has to be the exception, not the rules. And I found most of our private hospitals in Nigeria now, any child, fever, malaria, injection 3 days. Please, let's stop. Let's stop, because polio is still with us. We are almost out of it, but please, let's even stop it. There are other complications of injections, which this is not about injection. Maybe that's another topic I need to talk about in future, but please, let's stop this love or patience for always giving everybody injection. Definitely not a child who is having polio. You're going to make life worse. And like I said, this paralysis is lifelong disability. Most of those children will not recover. Even those who appear to recover, they are going to develop what we call post-polio syndrome. So it's best not to than to deal with it. So most children can take the drugs by mouth. If your child is able to eat, if your child is not vomiting, your child should be able to take the drugs by mouth. And trust me, those drugs will work as well if you give it by mouth. You understand? So if a child is very ill and cannot take drugs by mouth, then that child has to be on admission. Okay. And when that child is on admission, for us pediatricians, we'll put in what we call a cannula. Okay. We'll put in something into the veins, and that is how we give the drugs through the vein. We don't want intramuscular injections as much as possible. Of course, we have a few drugs and vaccines that that's the only way we can give it through intramuscular routes, and those ones we have, those are the exceptions where we just have to do it. And even for those ones, we take precautions. So we try to avoid the buttocks, we try to avoid the sciatic nerve, we try to do either the deltoid muscle in the arm, or we try to do the laps, the what we call the rectus femoris muscle. That's the muscle of your lap in the front, and that is where we tend to give those injections. We try not to give injections at all. If you have to give it, please don't give on the buttocks, okay? And go for that, but as much as possible, mouth. Let's give everything by mouth. Except if a very ill child, then they should be on admission, and of course we should put in a cannula and give them through the veins. So this is one thing. And if you notice a child who is having fever, sore throat, or nausea, vomiting, not eating, having diarrhea, and then suddenly they cannot walk again, or they are telling you my leg are weak, they cannot move their legs, they cannot move their hands, please, you have to take those children to the hospitals, and preferably take them to a government hospital. Take them to either our general hospital or our teaching hospital, because once we see that is what we call acute flaccid paralysis, and the health professionals have to test that child for polio. So usually you will see the government, the public health workers, they will come around, they will give you a bottle so that your child can stool, and they will take a sample of that stool and they will take it to the lab and check for polio. I know many of us don't even think about some of these things, especially if you go to private hospital and they just treat your child for malaria or any of those things. So I'm just telling us because this is an awareness platform. So please, if you see a child who has fever and then suddenly cannot walk, please, or is weak in any of the limbs, that child has to go to a government hospital so that we can test for polio. And within a few days, we should get the result back. It's polio, it's not polio, it's very easy. We have a virology lab that is completely dedicated to they're evaluating those tools for polio, and then they will get back to the doctors. And this is to help the government keep track of cases of polio and to know whether there's an outbreak, and so that they can also report to the World Health Organization that we can monitor. And if we are reporting properly and we're not getting polio diagnosed in our virology lab, then we're sure that we are actually almost kicking polio out. And I think we're almost there in Nigeria. We are almost there. So let's just work together. Let's make sure we take our children for the immunization, and hopefully our children will not have the paralysis or will not have the deaths that come from polio. All right. Thank you so much for listening to me. If you have any questions on polio, feel free to go to our Facebook group. I just want to put the link down so we can see it. Feel free to go to our Facebook group, Ask the Pediatrician Facebook group. You can miss it, and feel free to type in your question. If you want to ask a question anonymously, you're welcome to do so. In other words, you can type your question without your name, and we will still answer them, because I know some of us are worried about our family members, our neighbors, picking up our names online, and we don't want people to know we're asking some questions, or we don't want, we respect your privacy and we always promote anonymity. So feel free to post your question without a name, and then we will try and answer them. Or of course, you can also send us an email on askthepediatricians.com or askthepediatricians@gmail.com. just come. So thank you so much. And remember, I've been talking about all the vaccine preventable diseases. If you have not listened to the podcast on diphtheria, measles, or tetanus, please go and listen to them as well. And please help us to share the video, share the podcast. Let's spread this information because knowledge is power, and health education is one of the strategies for reducing preventable child death. So, which is what we are working hard towards. Like Nigeria has a higher child mortality in the entire world, and all of organization, WHO, UNICEF, and of course, little ATP, we are all working together because we want these deaths to come down. And it will come down with you, our parents, our caregivers, being part of the stakeholders, being part of the support network to reduce this. And this is why we have this conversation from time to time. So till I come your way next time with another episode, talking, most likely I'll still take to this vaccine preventable diseases team, and I'll talk about another one next week. Till then, have a wonderful day, and remember to support our outreach ATP Schools First Aid Care Project. We will appreciate your donation. Nothing is too small, even 1,000 naira can go a long way. And watch out for us in the school nearby. And remember, we're planning to go to all the schools, so we really appreciate your support. And if you want to be a partner and you want to work together with us, sponsor, or you want us to work together, please reach out to us. Send us an email at askthepediatrician@gmail.com, or send us a WhatsApp on our phone number +234 905 68 6916818. Sorry, let me take that again. +234 905 6916818. Thank you so much for joining me today, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Are you a mother, father, or you are involved in caring for children? If yes, then listen to Ask the Pediatricians every Thursday by 10 a.m. for insightful discussion on popular child health topics such as dangerous child health practices, immunization, infant feeding, developmental milestones, and so much more. You also get to ask questions on these topics and listen to answers to real-life child health issues by a pediatrician. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation is devoted to health education and information of parents and caregivers of children in the community to support you in raising healthy children. Don't miss Ask the Pediatricians with Dr. Bami because it's informative, educative, and interactive. Ask the Pediatricians Hour, the program for caring parents.